Hello. Wow, such a wondrous glowing lighting. Welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and this is World Watch and the highlight videos, mashup videos. Over the last 6 weeks, I had made weekly videos where I discuss my thoughts watching every single playoff game, yes, including that one, of all 11 participating regions. Those have come and gone, and I'm still working on some other videos at this moment, highlighting each and every team to give a quick introduction. But in the meantime, as I'm still working on that, I thought, not quick, but simpler, I will just put in large videos of the highlights, and I'll be putting a multitude of them, one for all of the playoffs in order of how they appeared, and one for each region in order of how they appeared. If you look at the title, that's the video you're watching. So, without further ado, let's just get to the first one. Starting with, it's the inaugural LCK playoff. Right from Korea, we've got Liiv Sandbox versus DRX. And Game 4 alone is worth watching. On the edge of your seat at any moment. God, it's so good. Now, for the first series from the LCK in the summer, and I'm slightly concerned though. This was action-packed at the tail end of each game and slow at the start of each game. Liiv Sandbox over here, for their part, had such solid coordination during their fights, some great vision application around neutrals, some questionable vision denial, but the entire time I'm left wondering what happens when they are proactive instead of reactive from the start of the game. And we got the answer in Game 3. Now, while the draft didn't help, it did show that Liiv Sandbox benefited from waiting for their fights that came to them and punishing, as their style largely benefited from a strong use of zoning and punishing any mispositioning. I'm concerned that a team that shows proactivity in a way that doesn't give any space for Liiv Sandbox to play their style of team fighting may just result in them fumbling. Now, DRX, for their part, are not out and will get the play into their regional finals themselves, right? But if this is what's to be shown from their proactive play themselves, then I have some questions about their target priority and how they play around neutrals that really confused me to no end. DRX shows some solid work with vision and wave manipulation, really putting a lot of pressure on the side lanes, but being ahead in gold and losing pressure overall in the map while having the tempo of the side lanes and losing the tempo while being proactive in the early game is not a good look. Now, granted, both of these teams being proactive is a good sign. I'd rather see this kind of proactivity than some of the passivity of the other teams in some of the emerging regions, but it's not a good look otherwise. Shout out to Prince and Def, who carried the world on their shoulders like no tomorrow. Again, watch Game 4. Holy smokes, these two really go all out. So let's take a look at the next series. We head off to the LCK in Korea for the second match of round 2. Damwon Gaming Kia versus KT Rolsters. And, jeez, I would recommend this because it's rather insane, but like, where to begin? Both teams show insane application of vision and team fighting. And yet it seems like that doesn't extend to much else going on. Where Damwon have incredible early game pressure, as every year before this iteration, their late game is questionable on a lot of occasions where they choose to slow the game down to scale instead of pressuring the advantages they need to balloon. KT, on the other hand, for their part, have a solid understanding of when they need to fight and no understanding of when not to fight. Their motto is if we win the fight, we get ahead regardless of the context. And, to elaborate a little bit, knowing exactly when they need to fight is one thing, but in a situation where they're like, we shouldn't be fighting, they still decide to fight anyways, is really freaking weird. Granted, I prefer KT's approach to the game between the two of them. It leaves them very short-sighted on how to engage their opponents, and it helps that Damwon is their opponents is, my goodness, some of their macro choices leave me wondering where do they expect to go with some of these priorities. Overall, these games are fun, but out of the bottom 4 teams, I don't have a lot of faith for these two if the decision making isn't resolved, because as of now, neither of these teams look like world caliber teams. And it's incredibly telling that the series ends as one team is getting the Cloud Soul while the other one is hitting Nexus turrets. Shout out to Duckdam and Aiming, whose teams seriously drafted all of their hopes and dreams together, just enough times for them to die. Let's take a look at the next series. We head to the semifinals of the LCK straight in Korea. We've got GEN.G versus Liiv Sandbox. And honestly, anybody who knew how this matchup was going to go knew bloodshed was right on the table immediately. Now, I mentioned before that Liiv Sandbox knows when to fight, but not when not to fight. Fighting is such a hard motto of theirs, and GEN.G match it 100% to a T. The biggest difference is that GEN.G punish Liiv Sandbox mistakes wholesale and regularly, just almost every single go, there's a mistake made, punished so easily. And it comes to a point where even when Sandbox are ahead, GEN.G are getting more gold to eventually win out in the late game and scale better. And a lot of this has to do with how their draft is set up. Now, there was a point where I realized that the Sandbox have an incredible grasp of how the early game plays out, but wind up lost on what to do in the late game. Just to make sure how their win conditions are met. And while Sandbox will have a chance in the regional qualifiers for one of the last 2 spots at Worlds for Korea, this is not a good look for what Worlds would look like if they qualify. GEN.G, for their part, look and feel like Sandbox, but with all of the preparations and proper side lane pressure as an added package and bonus. I'm here just wondering when the aggressive fighting that GEN.G bring will be punished, or if all the teams will have to worry about the constant pressure this team brings, as 100% the fastest team I've seen so far from what has been played. Shout out to Lehens and Ruler, who played out of their minds the whole series. Lehens especially. On his Yumi, God, the thing looks broken even more than usual. Let's take a look at the next one. And we have the LCK in Korea. We got ourselves T1 versus Damwon Kia. A nice little rivalry that, how the hell did we get here? So first off, congratulations on T1 and GEN.G on being the second and third teams to qualify for Worlds, respectively. Now, how did we get here, really? Damwon Kia, for their part, still show, to be an excellent team regarding some vision control and early game pressure, but their hesitation and passivity in the mid to late game is really on spotlight, as T1 consistently know how, what to do and commit to it and have a game plan at all times at any given, for all 5 games. Now, Damwon Kia have interesting draft choices that I don't fully agree with, And for the first time in a long time, I think that T1 makes some excellent draft decisions, which is something not to be said lightly, especially for playoff T1s. I do think that T1, with their incredible consistent coordination and teamfight prowess, show some lacking in terms of the vision control that could be leveled up a little bit, at least to match the degree in which they have their vision denial, which really helped inform a lot of their decisions and how they approach the game excellently. Damwon Kia move down to the regional finals and have more chances to qualify for Worlds, but the series really showed to me that they can pull off proactivity if they want, but something is holding them back where their indecisiveness really hurts them overall. And it makes me hesitant to think that they may even qualify at all, given most of what I've seen, just unless they fix up their lack of proactivity. I am excited to see what the first and second seed of the LCK are going to show in the finals. It'll give us a nice little sneak peek as to what the rest of the world will have to contend with. And we'll also get to see who does get first and second seed for the World's placement in the finals. Let's take a look at the next series, though. It's the grand finals of the LCK. We've got GEN.G versus T1. Honestly, this is probably the longest and most recognizable rivalry in League of Legends, period. I can't. And for it to come ahead over here in such a one-sided stomp. What an absolute masterclass from GEN.G, who outplayed T1 and confirmed being the first seed for the LCK. The previous series was, matching chaos with just better chaos against Liiv Sandbox. This series is about matching control with even better control. Both teams have excellent vision play, map movement, side lane control, draft sense, and so on and so on. But GEN.G show up just a little better. Not just in laning matchups, but in team fightings, execution of win conditions, zone play, so on, all of the big buzzwords. Any little thing that T1 can do, GEN.G can do better. And not from a lack of trying by T1. While T1 may have been a little bit more proactive, GEN.G spent a lot of time finding ways to force mistakes out of T1 or create winning trades around the map when they are forced to answer T1's plays. T1 never got a chance to play their crazy tactical approaches consistently because GEN.G met them at their best. I think from this, GEN.G is for sure one of the contenders for the world titles, especially in this form. And while maybe not the favorite, I want to see what the other teams look like at their finals and qualifications, but they look to be semi-finalists for sure. I honestly want to shout out the whole team from GEN.G for being so incredibly good, but my behavior has been mostly to shout out just two members. So I'll give it to Peanut and Lehens, who honestly were just instrumental in keeping T1 at bay and zoned out. So excited to see both these teams at Worlds. God, it's going to be so good. Let's take a look at the next one. It's the regional qualifiers, and I still count that as a playoff game. So here we go. We got the LCKs, Damwon Kia versus Liiv Sandbox. And congratulations on Damwon Kia on being the 12th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, what happens when you never let Liiv Sandbox fight on their terms? Well, it's what Damwon Kia did to succeed against Liiv Sandbox. It was super simple. You just played the side lanes better. Liiv Sandbox have a hyper focus on team fighting, and when they don't have the tools at the right time, they falter, either from poor flank setups or poor lack of awareness of flanks, the level differences, or the straight up gold difference that would exist. And that really comes as Dove being the weak link in this setup. Having Nuguri be the stronger of the two laners made a huge impact on how Liiv Sandbox were able to perform. Because outside of that, Liiv Sandbox have solid drafts, and both teams play vision just as well as the other, and they both have similar proactive plays and poor judgment calls as to when they need to fight. Damwon and Kia, for their part, recognized the weakness in Liiv Sandbox, and yet still found it incredibly hard to just play out the late game and close out huge decisive leads. A weakness that, for years now, this was so well documented, will be just equally heavily punished as we head into Worlds. Is like, no team is going to let them get away with mindlessly playing out the late game, lost and confused. I can't find a way how you would garner such a huge lead with no Flame Horizon and then some, and not be able to close out games with like an 8 to 10k gold lead. Now, otherwise, a lot of the weaker teams at Worlds are not going to know how to deal with the early game snowball that Damwon is accustomed to, which is just par for the course. Now, shout out to Showmaker, who created a lot of space in these fights, and to Nuguri, who, again, was the difference maker in this series. Let's take a look at the next one. We're in the LCK's lowest of the low regional finals brackets, with DRX versus KT Rolsters, and I don't know what to tell you about this series. Honestly, KT had a lot going for them. Incredible early game, fantastic vision and neutral play, solid coordination while ahead. What they don't have, right, is consistent late game macro choices or even consistent drafts. The drafts especially feel insulting in some sense. The worst part is KT is a cut above DRX roll for roll and should have won the first game and gotten a 3-0. Or at least that was the expectation. And I think that expectation got to their heads as late game approaches and they become lazy or uncoordinated, or as the drafts further into the series become erratic, allowing just DRX easier to execute compositions. Overall, allowing DRX to play a style in which they can come out on top is just kind of unacceptable, really, because their style is like, DRX have good vision occasionally and poor vision regularly, inconsistent neutral setups and side lane control, and awkward positioning for any skirmishes. But they at least adapted and found so many chances to succeed in this series, but it's one of those things where you don't force mistakes, you just let mistakes happen and then you win. Watching this, I'm convinced that neither of these teams would have won against Liiv Sandbox, and if the previous series of DRX versus Liiv Sandbox had any indication of what's to come next, I don't think the rematch will have a different result. Shout out to Juhan, who subbed in and did a whole lot more than Piosik could, and Kingen, who was the most consistent member of the team. Let's take a look at the next series. It's the last playoff series for the LCK in Korea. We've got DRX versus Liiv Sandbox in a stunning turn of events. Congratulations to DRX, who are the 17th team to qualify for Worlds. Result literally no one expected. Liiv Sandbox had such a strong early game approach and solid coordination, but somehow were super inconsistent coming into today's matchup. Looking back at the previous series these two teams played against each other, it was clear that Liiv Sandbox outmaneuvered and outfought DRX at any given turn, but over here in this one, the Sandbox fumble draft choices. They fumble an entire game. They allow DRX the full flexibility to play how they want at the pace that they want for zero extra cost. Now, DRX, for their part, put in Pyosik for some reason in one game, and it didn't do very much for them. But once Juhan is in, it's just like the team is completely transformed. Early game is proactive and engaged. This version is just a lot more consistent, and when ahead, they don't lose pressure around the map, a issue that they regularly had with the previous version of this roster. The sub made a huge difference, as neutral fights and early jungle skirmishes were the make or break of any given game within this series. The one thing that leaves me a little concerned is how the pace of the game is so slow for DRX. Many of the other teams going into Worlds will be playing at such a breakneck speed that DRX may never get the chance to play their style. But the style of side lane controls and zoning teams out of neutral objectives is a fairly good look for them. Shout out to Juhan, who is a lifesaver for this team, and Kingen, who really outmaneuvered Dove for map pressure and really enabled this side lane control win condition for them. Let's take a look at the next series. Damn, that was a journey. That's 94 playoffs, or depending on the region that you were watching, anywhere between 5 to 15 best of fives. If you want to watch from the other regions, or you really want to watch the supercut, on either side, I don't remember which side I'm going to put it on, you can just watch those there. I want to hear your thoughts also on like which one of these were your favorite, what teams you think you're going to be like rooting for, just anything and everything down below. I'll be again making some videos further down the line, or should have some videos produced further down the line with all of the magic that comes with it. So keep your eyes peeled. And with that, I'll see you all next time for when I do the introductions of all the different teams. Ciao. Thank you all for watching.